Hi, Alan Cox here. Hey, so you created your retention policy for mailbox for your users, or maybe an adaptive scope for your executives, or your um, marketing department, or HR department, or whatever it may be. And maybe that retention policy is for 3 years. But suppose you now want to go back and target specific information that might be in those mailboxes, maybe a sensitive information type, maybe an account um, ID or customer account information, or in an example we've been using is a patient ID, right? So how do we do that? Well, that's where retention labels come in. Retention labels can carve out some exceptions to our retention policy and say we've got a 3-year retention on our mailbox, but maybe if we have patient ID or customer account number, any sort of sensitive information that or keyword, whether it's custom or what have you, we can now target a label to those particular items, um, to single them out, if you will, and give us some exceptions to our overall retention policy. Maybe add 3 years to those or 7 years to those items, and the rest of the mailbox still maintains its original retention policy. That's going to be our focus today, creating retention labels and policies. Let's get started. All right, here we are in purview.microsoft.com. Now, the last time we looked at retention policies, we went down to data lifecycle management here, and we went down to just retention policies. We created retention policies just here. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about retention labels. So, remember, we talked about the different types of retention that we have. So we've got just retention policies, and retention policies are more at the container level. They're more high level, a mailbox, a SharePoint site, etc. And then we've got retention labels, and then which we'll talk about now. And then we've got these MRM policies that we'll talk about next, and that is the specific to Exchange. We'll talk about those shortly. But we talk about retention labels. So let's say that we've got just this kind of wide. Let's look at retention policy. So we've got this retention policy here, basically, and we've got this is an adaptive scopes. Remember, we talked about this particular scope was focusing in on maybe an executive team, right? Executive department, 3 years mailbox. Okay. But let's say, for example, that if there's an item within this mailbox that needs to have a longer retention period, okay, we might consider a retention label. So retention label is very specific. We create labels for items that need exceptions to your retention policies. Exceptions include extending the retention period for specific documents or preventing certain emails from being permanently deleted. Okay, so let's take kind of that example here, and let's just say we've got a retention policy here. Now, retention policy and we'll use adaptive. You can do this for static, but we'll use this adaptive, for example. We've got a retention policy here that just says 3 years across the board. But maybe we've got a regulatory commitment for anything that is sensitive. We want to make sure that we maintain that for a longer period of time. So let's just give this a go. So we're going to go into retention labels here, and I'm going to create a label. And I'm going to create this label. And let's just try it this way. Let's just do patient ID label. Retention label. And now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add some description for users. Label to ensure emails or documents with patient ID is retained. Let's just say 7 years, and we'll do this. Now, I'm just going to copy this for the administrators as well. And we're going to go next here, and I'm going to say retain items forever or for a specific period of time. I can enforce actions, so we can do, we can go in here and say for when items were created. We can say what's the action, delete, or change the label. We can go in and we can say just apply a label, or we say retain items for forever or for a specific period of time. So what I want to do in this case is I want to apply this retention label for, we'll say 7 years, that's fine, for when the items were created. And that is fine here. Now you can go in and create different types of events. And that's the other thing about this is this can be based off of certain events. We won't get into that a whole lot, although we'll talk a little bit about that when we get into records management. We get into file plans. We'll talk a little bit about this and how this kind of works and how it varies just a little bit. But we're going to go in, so we're going to retention for 7 years, delete. Now we can do a start disposition here, so we can say, okay, after the retention period, so in this case after 7 years, we can delete it, or we can start a disposition review. So maybe we need some additional steps to happen. So once that 7-year period hits, or the retention period for this label hits, we can say we want to start multi-stage review for 7 days, and then we can call this stage 2, and we can just do multi-stage reviews and then who needs to actually review it. So automatically stage approval out of stage. We're going to say governance review, something along that line. Let's just see here. And then reviewers for the stage here. We can add in reviewers, etc. So we can do some multi-stage reviews. We're not going to do that for this case, but I'll just show you what that is. We can change the label. We can say, what's the new label now going to be? It could actually be a different label that maybe, I don't know, just some example, could maybe different classifiers, or move it into a different retention period. Maybe add a Copilot block, something there that Copilot no longer can access if it reaches a certain period of time. There's all kinds of things we can do there. We can do power automate flows, or we can deactivate retention settings. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the item automatically just for simplicity's sake. And I'm going to go next here. And that's it. Now all I've done is just created the label, okay? It's nothing really too special about the label other than we've just set a retention period, okay? And so we're going to go ahead and create that label. So now we've got a patient ID retention label. Now we're going to go in and we're going to see how we want to publish this label. Now we can publish the label just like a sensitivity label. We can publish it to Microsoft 365 locations. This label will show up, and users can manually apply to their content to set retention. I generally like to do auto apply, so I'm going to do an auto apply here, this label to a specific type of content. And so we're going to do that. So when we click done here, it should kick us into this wizard. Now we can go in and create this. We can not create the label policy at all, and we can go in and create that also. But we're just going to go ahead and auto apply this label to a specific type of content. So I'm going to say done, and then it's going to fire up this wizard here. And now we're going to say, I like to do auto label policy, and then patient ID retention. See if that allows us to do this. Description, we'll just give it some meaningful description here. This tells me this is an auto label policy. Patient ID is the label, and it's for retention. And I could do 7 year, something that makes it, makes sense. In any case, we're going to go here, apply this label to content contains sensitive information. We can apply the label to content that specific keywords, or that matches a trainable classifier, or apply label to cloud attachments and links shared in Exchange, Teams, Viva, and Copilot. In this case, I'm just going to apply this label to content that contains sensitive information type. And we're going to go here. Now remember, we were going to, I'm going to go custom here, and we're going to go next, and I'm going to say, this group name here. See, we're going to go, all right, here I'm just going to create a group. I'm going to create a group. It could be just default. It's fine here. I'm going to create a group. I'm just going to get rid of that one. So we got a default group name here. And then I'm going to add sensitive info type. And remember, we have the sensitive info type of patient ID record. And, okay, remember there's an EDM or a exact data match that we had created here. In this case, I'm just going to do the custom one that we built. Custom patient ID record, and I'm going to add that. And so now I'm telling this policy that wherever you find sensitive information type of patient ID record, and we're gonna get to scope here in a second, but we'll say, and we can do this adaptive. We can do static, which is just across the board, or I can say static. So if I only want to apply this to say executives, okay, or specific sites, department, whatever I can, or I can do it across the board to anybody, regardless of what department. That's where that static would come in. But I do really like using adaptive scopes to kind of control who gets what policy. Now, if you're going to have the same policy regardless of who the user is, then you might just do a static scope here. But I'm going to go ahead and just keep in line and do an adaptive scope here. And I'm going to say executive department. I'm going to say, okay. And now we're just doing, I'm just really focusing on mailboxes on this one. Again, I could do what the scope is, but I'm just doing mailboxes here. And we're going to go next here. And so that's the label. Now, had I not created the policy when I finished making the label, it would ask me to add the label. In this case, it knows what label I'm talking about. And there it is. It's 7 years. Keep and then delete. This is record is regulatory. That's related to sort of the file plan. We'll talk about that in an upcoming video. We're going to go next here, and now we have the option to test before turning it on. And I do recommend you do this. It'll give you some insight as to what it's going to pull. But I do recommend testing that before we turn that on. And we click next here, and then we hit submit. So what have we done? What we've done is we have an existing 3-year policy for our mailboxes for our adaptive scope of executives. Okay, didn't have to be an adaptive scope. Don't let that really confuse you. But in this case, we're targeting a particular department, executives. They have a 3-year across the board retention. After that 3 years, mail starts dropping from their mailbox, right? It's a 3-year retention. Okay, now, in addition to that, what we've done here is we've created a label policy that says, taking that retention policy into account, and really doesn't really matter. In addition, anything that has patient ID in scope. In other words, if an email has a patient ID, SIT or sensitive information type, then we want to make sure that we have a retention of 7 years, and that's where that label comes in. So it's only going to target mail items because it is specific to exchange mailboxes in this case, and it's only going to target anything that's a patient ID SIT, that's a custom sensitive type that we created, and it will take that specific item email that contains that information, and it will keep it for 7 years. That's what we've done. So that is it. That is, it's already saved it. By the way, that's kind of a bug. It's already submitted it, and then it comes back and says, do you want to submit this again? And it says no. It's going to give me this error. And the reason is because it's basically already created. It created it, but it gives me this submit again. I've encountered this before. I just hit cancel. And it's gonna say, sure you want to cancel? Yeah. But watch, we'll go ahead and we will go to label policies and we should see our policy show up there. And it is in simulation, and that is it. That's our policy. So that is how we create a label and a label auto policy for retention in Microsoft Purview. Well, I hope this has been helpful, and I thank you for watching.